أعوذ بالله تعالى من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وحبيبنا وخاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في أرضه روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفدا السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We reached the end of our journey together, and I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. Your presence, your engagement, your commitment. Brothers and sisters, we are reaching the tip of this journey, the top, the pinnacle of this journey. And we're going to tackle a concept that's so deep, that's so profound, that's so transformative, that it has the power to revolutionize our whole understanding of life, our whole understanding of faith, our understanding of our place in this universe. And I'm sure this is going to answer a lot of questions that you might have had before, or maybe questions that you have heard before. Like, for example, who here has heard or felt before this? If God knows everything, then do my choices even matter? And if God has knowledge of my sustenance and my rizq, then is there a point of actually working hard and trying to make money if God's written it for me? Is my destiny set in stone? What's the point of trying if everything's predetermined anyway? See, these questions, if they resonate with you, then prepare yourself, because tonight is going to be the night where we unravel one of the most misunderstood yet most crucial concepts in our faith. And this is the concept of bada'. Sometimes it's considered bid'ah. And the term I want to use for it in English to help you sort of, although I couldn't find a proper term for this, is divine unfolding. And I promise, inshallah, by the end of tonight, not only are you going to understand it, but inshallah, you have the ability to explain it to other people. But it's going to be profound in your journey in tying everything that we've done so far together to this point. And before we begin, I want to just show you how powerful this is through two ahadith. One hadith from Imam al-Rida alayhi salam and one hadith from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam al-Rida alayhi salam says, and listen to this, listen clearly. He says, God has ordained to every prophet that he sent two things in common. Do you guys remember when we were speaking about the system of beliefs? That all of our prophets have the same beliefs. When it comes to Tawheed, when it comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they all have the same beliefs. There is no prophet or imam that have a different belief system. Where they differ is in Sharia. Do you remember we said that there are things that evolve? There are two things that have been common between every prophet, from Adam alayhi salam to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa to all the imams, and that is this. Number one, the prohibition of alcohol. For every prophet, it's known that the alcohol is haram. And the second is believing in the concept of bada'. To believe in divine unfolding. This is how powerful this concept is. The second hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, if people knew how important and the rewards they attained by speaking and conversing in the concept of bada' and trying to unravel its mystery, they would never speak about anything else. So, let's listen to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and let's begin unraveling this with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I want to first begin by posing a question. And I want you to really, really internalize this question and be honest with the answer. If you knew with absolute certainty that your destiny was already written, would you live your life any differently? If you knew that everything that's going to happen, your destiny is written, would you do anything different? Take a moment, think about this question, keep it in mind. Would you take more risks, knowing that the outcome is determined? Would you become more passive? Like, just lay back, say, my actions don't matter. If God's determined this for me, there's no point of trying. How would you go? Now, this question strikes at the heart of the misconception that we're trying to talk about tonight. And it's one, by the way, it's not like a question that just arose. This is the time from the Prophet, from the time of the other prophets, from the time of the Imam. This question has been posed. And even growing up, we even had this misconception where you'd believe that, you'd say, Allah khalas, Allah katib lak. Katib lak ya bisir. Whatever is written for you is going to happen. If my nasib is my nasib. There's no point of trying hard. If God wants me to make X amount of money, I'll make X amount of money, whether I put the effort in or not. Now, let me tell you, brothers and sisters, this idea can really be destructive. Because on one value it sounds good, right? Allah katib lak, and God's the most knowing and He's the most knowledgeable, He's written for me. But it can sometimes lead to becoming dangerously passive. In other words, you become dangerously lazy. Catastrophically lazy. You say, what's the point of studying my exam? If Allah has already written for me to pass, there's no point. Khalas, I'll pass. What's the point of trying? What's the point of working hard in my marriage? Now, if nasib is nasib, then if I'm going to stay with this person, I'm going to stay with this person. If I'm going to get divorced, I'm going to get divorced. What's the point of trying? And for other people, what it does is it creates resentment. But to who? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why would Allah do this to me? If you believe that Allah has written and predestined everything, and I am going through the worst hardship in my life, that means Allah wants me to go through this. Why has God written this for me? See where it becomes destructive? We begin to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not as the most merciful, as Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, but as a dictator. Who can put their hand up if they can resonate with this image? Growing up, we thought that God is just on this throne holding a three-headed, what do they call it? What is it? Yeah, the trident. And He's just waiting for you to make a mistake so He can punish you. And so this image that we create becomes very destructive. Whereas this is not what our faith teaches at all. This is what that concept of Bada comes to counter. This is where the concept of Bada enters, and it reforms and changes the way you see the world. This beautiful principle, mind you, although all the prophets alayhimussalam had been ordained with this principle, very few religions today apply and believe in this principle. Especially in the Muslim world, and that's what we're going to unpack today as well. I'm not going to go too deep, but I'm going to unpack the different Islamic opinions on predestination and free will. So, and I just want to give you a quick example just so you can sort of internalize or picture what we're talking about. Imagine you're watching a chess grandmaster play against a novice, against an amateur, someone that's first time they play chess. The grandmaster can foresee every possible move and counter move of this amateur. But what happens is, although they know all the potential outcomes, what happens is it doesn't really matter what the amateur's decision is. Whatever the decision they make, the counter is going to be in the mind of the grandmaster. He knows where this can potentially go. Trust me, I'm going to give so many examples. You're going to get bored of the examples. You're going to understand this very well. But that's just an idea. That the grandmaster can predict what he's going to do. And if he does this, I'm going to do this. But if he does this, then I can change my plan. And you can see the plan and the movement of the chessboard is molding and adapting. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and the reason why this is powerful is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, your choices matter. To come and say, I'm going to sit down in my room and if I'm going to pass, I'm going to pass, or there's no point of working hard on my marriage, or there's no point of working hard to make money, and it's going to come and be passive in life. He says, no, your choices matter. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not change the condition of a people until they begin that change from within themselves. He's making it clear. You have the decision to make change. Don't expect me to make change without you initiating the change. That's choice. Or in another surah, Surah Al-Insan, where He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِنَّا هَدَيْنَاهُ السَّبِيلِ إِمَّا شَاكِرًا إِمَّا كَفُورًا. Indeed, we have guided him to our way. We have guided him to our path. Either he is grateful or he's ungrateful. Now let me ask you, is that not a choice? Is He not saying he's got a choice? Either he chooses to be grateful or he chooses to be ungrateful. Now, this can be a question as well. And this is why we need to go into the different schools of thought and what they say. Because Someone can also have a problem with this. And I'll explain that in a moment. But as I'm going to explain to you the three different schools of thought in this regard, I don't want you to look at it from a judgmental point of view. I want you to imagine yourself in the shoes of the scholars that are making this claim, to try and understand what are they trying to say. Okay? So there are essentially three schools that address this in the field of Islam. We have the Ash'ari school of thought, the Mu'tazili school of thought, and the Ja'fari school of thought, which is our school of thought. Let's start by unpacking each one with a lot of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Let's go to the divine determinism, the school of the Ash'ari, which in Arabic is called Al-Jabr. I want you to imagine everything in this world, every single thing that happens, from you scratching your nose to the flutter of a butterfly's wings, to the thought that just popped up in your head as I'm speaking, everything that happens in this existence is predetermined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That He is essentially the mastermind behind everything that is happening. The Ash'aris believe that all aspects of our lives is woven into a divine script by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on the surface, basically what they're trying to say is that you are an actor playing out a script and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the director. You can't do anything outside of the director's claim. Now what happens, the reason why they make this claim is because they say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-knowing. He's the all-powerful. He's the one that has ultimate authority. How can you come, if you say right now, I'm going to do something and I have choice, and God doesn't know what I'm going to do, therefore you're limiting God's knowledge. How is God all-knowing? Which makes sense, right? It's a good point. If God is infinite in knowledge, then how are you claiming that you have free will? No, every single thing that happens on this earth is predetermined. Now, what this does is this creates a problem. Because if you were to ask, Ya Allah, on the day of judgment, how are people judged? How can Yazid go to hell and Hussein go to heaven if they were both forced to do what they did? They come and say, no, you can't, as a normal human being, you can't comprehend the justice of God. God does whatever He wants. He will put whoever He wants in heaven, whoever He wants in hell. That's not for you and I to discuss and to talk about. We're limited in our ability to understand that. So they say that Allah's justice is beyond our comprehension. So this is the first school of thought. What? Our behavior is 100% predetermined. It's a script and we're living it out. The second school of thought is the one of tafweed. It's the one of absolute free will. It's Allah. It's literally the complete opposite of the first. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Mu'tazilis believe that Allah creates us and He gives us complete free will. That in Allah's justice, and look what they latched onto. The Ash'aris latched onto what? Al-Alim, Al-Qadir, Al-Qawi. The Ash'ari are latching onto what? The merciful. Allah is just. He would not put you in heaven or hell and He's forced your behavior. No, He gives you free will and then He'll judge you accordingly. He doesn't know. Your free will is your free will. He puts you in this world and you just behave and you act however you want. But it also, this school of thought, now it's good in a sense where, so now we can sense some certain sense of personal responsibility. There's consequences to our behavior. That Allah SWT, like Yazid will go to hell and Imam Hussein will go to heaven because free will and consequences and actions. But the problem that arises is, what about Allah is the most knowledgeable? What about Allah is the most knowing? He's the all-knowing. How do you reconcile the two? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't know what I'm going to do, therefore there's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's no longer all-knowing. So this also creates an issue. So, if you realize each school is latching onto 2 or 3 different attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, brothers and sisters, the problem here fundamentally comes down to, do you remember when we talked about the system of beliefs? We said everything happens, it starts with your beliefs. We said every belief or every worldview that you have is predetermined by the lens in which you view the world. The problem here, my brothers and sisters, is they latched onto Tawheed in the wrong way. See, when we look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we say Allah is Al-Qadir, Al-Qawi, Al-Alim, Al-Rahman, Al-Rahim, the most knowledgeable, the most loving, the kind, the compassionate, the merciful, the sustainer, and all that. The reason why we use these different terms is not because Allah has different attributes. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. God cannot be cut up into, you have God who's wise and you have God who's knowledgeable. No, God's wisdom and His knowledge and His mercy and His sustenance and His justice is all one. But for you and I to comprehend it, we look at Allah's behavior. Here, this shows His justice. Here, shows His knowledge. Here, shows His mercy. But His sifatuhu ayn dhatihi, we study in theology. His attributes are they're Him. So when Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is asked this question, his reply to the question is based on true Tawheed. So a man comes to Imam Sadiq, and this is the third perspective, the Ja'fari perspective. A man comes to Imam Sadiq and he asks him, he says, do we believe, are we for free will or are we for predestination? Are we Jabr or are we Tafweed? What are we? Where do we fit? He says we are neither. وَلَكِنْ أَمْرٌ بَيْنَ أَمْرَيْنِ. He says we are in between the two. Okay, what does that mean? Where's in between the two? And this, my brothers and sisters, is where the beautiful concept of Bada comes in. Where it creates this pathway, this harmonious pathway into understanding our position in this world. But that, brothers and sisters, teaches that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His infinite wisdom, knows all the possibilities, knows all the outcomes, but, and this is crucial, He has given us the gift of choice within this framework. It's like, for example, imagine you're writing a story. Imagine you are right now an author, and you've created a character, and you know all the possible plot twists. You've written the story. You know what happens in chapter 1, 2, 3, 6, 9, 12, all of them. You know all the potential endings, but you allow your character to make choices that shape the narrative throughout the book. Now their choices are real. Their choices have consequences. But even though you as the author, you know all of this, you knew all the possibilities, yet you gave these choices. Now essentially, this is the essence of Bada. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the potential outcomes, but your choice plays a huge role in the unfolding of the plan. To explain it further, it's like, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, let's say you come across a situation, let's say you have an exam, or let's say you're about to get married. You meet someone, and you're getting to know this person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides you choices. He says you could treat this person in way 2, or way 3. Depending on what choice you make. Let me give you another example. The example of you go to university, okay? And you're choosing what do you want to study. Now, you've got so many options to choose from. And you choose, let's say, engineering. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you have all these options to choose from. I've given you all these options to choose from. And when you choose engineering, there's other options that are going to open up. And then when you go to university and you start studying, there's going to be other options that open up. All your decisions that you're making are opening up options. Every option that you choose, other options are going to come up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the comparison that we're making is, Allah knows every single choice and option that is available, but He gives you the freedom to choose which one do you want. So if you were to choose engineering, these are the 3 options that are going to come up. If you choose to study, these are the options. If you choose to neglect, these are the options. If you choose to not take it serious enough, these are the options. If you study and you get your marks, these are the options. If you don't study, these are the options, and so on, and you keep going. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows all of these options, but He gives you the power to make a choice. Now, your decision, what it's doing is it's shaping the narrative. And this is where dua plays a huge role. Because where does dua fit in? Where does dua play its role in our behavior and our choices and ultimately what happens to us? See, remember we said you have options and you have choices, and Allah knows the choices, but He gives you the free will to choose. Dua is a way, dua does two things. It's a way to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to ask for one of two things or both of these things. Number one, it's to make X part of the narrative. Ya Allah, allow me to, get X mark, for example. I want to get 90% in my exam. Or I want to marry so-and-so person. Or I want to have this type of spouse. Or I want to get in this type of job or work. When you do dua, it opens up the option. Depending on the sincerity of the dua, of course, depending on the depth of the dua. That's one thing. And the second thing dua can do for you is it can guide you to choosing the right decision which will get you to the outcome that you want. Does that make sense? Dua will guide you to choose the right decision which will allow X to happen. So let's say you pray, Allah, I want X to happen. X meaning put whatever you want. You want something to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will either make it an option through your sincere dua, or what He might do is He might guide you to choosing the right decision which will eventually lead you to what you're asking for. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't answer your dua. Now if He doesn't answer your dua, what does that mean? It means, O limited being, O limited human, my representative, my khalifa, the thing which you're asking for, you might think it's right for you, but if you were to choose that option, then down the track it's going to lead you to down really, really negative places. So either He won't guide you to the choice or He won't make it an option. And this is where the power of dua comes in. How does dua affect and impact your fate? Is it opens up options. Now I want to give you an analogy, inshallah, that can bring this home, and then we'll go to the practical application of bada. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Imagine we had 3 classrooms. 3 classrooms with 3 different teachers and a different set of students. In the first classroom, we have the strict teacher. In the second classroom, we have the hands-off teacher. And in the third classroom, we have the guiding teacher. Let's explain which teacher does what. In the first classroom with the strict teacher, the teacher has this brilliantly planned curriculum in play, and the lesson is planned to the T. He goes, every single minute of the class is scripted. The students have to follow every single instruction to the letter. The teacher believes that everything that the student does in this class is part of this perfect plan that I've got in place. Yep, these students don't have much room to ask questions or to have their little personal input. And all their actions are closely monitored. He's just waiting for them. This would represent the Ash'ari school of thought. That we are predestined. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written everything for us. He's like that teacher, the strict teacher. The second is, and if you wanted to picture that classroom, you'd have a teacher like this, and all the students are just like scared because they don't know what to do. They're just playing out the script. The second classroom would be the hands-off teacher. Now this teacher comes in and he believes that all these students should have their own autonomy, they should have their freedom, they should do whatever they want. He gives them the basic materials, he gives them the guidelines, and then he sits back and he puts his hand on his head and he just lets them do whatever they want. Complete freedom, lets them explore what they want, and they can make their own decisions, they can experiment, they can make their mistakes. And the teacher trusts that the students by themselves will know how to guide themselves. Now, what happens, this teacher, because he doesn't intervene too much, he doesn't really get into that, doesn't intervene with the students start to feel a bit unsupported. They start to feel uncertain, start to feel left out. They're no longer, they don't have direction. Now the third school of thought, or the third classroom with the guiding teacher, in this classroom the teacher strikes a balance between guidance and freedom. What this teacher does is, he has a deep understanding of the subject that he wants to teach. He knows all the possible directions that he can go and all the directions that this lesson can take. So he provides a structured framework. He goes into the class, he says, this is what we're going to do, these are the objectives, and he says, and now that you know all the objectives and what we're going to do and what our goal is, now I want you to make your own choices within this framework. But the teacher is not sitting down, he's got his hands up, he's standing up, he's walking between the teachers, he's asking, he's getting involved, he's giving feedback, he's answering questions, he's adjusting the lesson based on what the students are saying, based on their needs, based on their actions. And the student starts to feel, oh, I'm empowered, I can take ownership. Although that the teacher had written this framework, my choices are playing a huge role whether I'm going to succeed or not. And so some students really listen and they pay attention and they try and work as hard as they can. And at the end of the classroom, the teacher comes and he says, well done, good job. You did here, you could have done better here. The other classrooms, on the other hand, there was no structure. In the first classroom, there's no point of even taking marks. You forced every single movement in this classroom. Now, these are the three classrooms. They start to create an understanding between the differences between the three schools of thought. Between being completely predestined or divine determinism, between free will and the concept of bada. Does that make sense? Is that clear? If it is, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, so now we've spoken about the theory. Let's make it a bit more realistic, more tangible. Imagine, my brothers and sisters, that you're standing in front of a blank canvas. And this canvas, it represents all of your existence. Your whole life is represented by this canvas. Your past, your present, your future. Now you pick up a paintbrush. Every single stroke that you put on this canvas, every stroke is an action, is a decision that you make. And before understanding bada, you might have thought, this canvas, a lot of people in terms of predestination, this canvas was already drawn for me. When we say my rizq is written for me, or my nasib is there for my nasib is my nasib, there's no point of even trying, then it's like saying this canvas is already drawn. There's no point of drawing. Allah's already drawn the canvas. But when you look through the lens of bada, through that lens of the middle ground between predestination and between free will, you see that every choice you make, it's a stroke. You are painting on this canvas. Every decision, every action, every behavior is part of the final masterpiece that you're creating. So you become the artist of your life, essentially, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is empowering and energizing you because He's the one that created the canvas, He's the one that created the paintbrush, He's the one that created the paint, and He's the one that gave you the ability to even put your hand on the paintbrush, to use your mind to paint the painting on that canvas. So the ultimate cause behind everything is God. You can't even pick up your finger without God. But He is not the direct cause of your behavior. See, He's the ultimate cause. We have cause and effect, right? The ultimate cause is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more you go down the chain, it's like, for example, if you were to put your hand on a doorknob and you were to open the door, there's a cause and effect. What's the cause and what's the effect? There's a few levels of causes. For example, would the door have opened if you did not twist the doorknob? No. Would the door have opened if your hand didn't go on the doorknob? No. Would the door have opened if you weren't alive? No. Would the door have opened if no one had created the door? No. So there's a lot of levels. But the ultimate cause, the thing that gives everything creation is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we're not denying that. Of course not. But to say I committed sin right now and it's God's fault, that's a fallacy. That's a problem. Okay? So how do we apply this in our life? There are 5 ways you could apply this concept in your life, brothers and sisters. Number 1, when you truly observe the idea of bada, when you truly uphold the idea that I have a huge role to play in the masterpiece of my life, the first thing is you become mindful with your decision making. Instead of, when you're making a choice, before you make a choice, no matter how big or small, take a breath and ask yourself, how does this decision align for Allah's purpose for me on this earth? Remember we said our purpose is Khulafa Allah, the representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How does this decision play in that role? And by the way, just a side note, this is where the idea of intention comes in. In Islam, your whole day can be turned into obedience simply by changing your intentions. A father can get up and go to work every single day, but if his intention is I am getting up to work to provide for my family because I am the provider of my family, then now his sweat is obedience whilst his worst is working. His intention of working changed everything. It changed the meaning of his behavior. So the first thing that Badat does is, now that you know that your behavior and your actions and your choices are a stroke in the masterpiece of your life, and that ultimately they have a big role to play, then you start to become more mindful of your decisions. Number two, you start to embrace personal responsibility. You no longer blame fate for your shortcomings. Like if it was written for me, this would have happened. You start to take personal responsibility. But that teaches you that while circumstances can be out of your control, a lot of circumstances, you're right, they're not in your control. But your responses are always your choice. The way you respond to the circumstance is in your control. You're not in control whether there's going to be traffic or not. You are in control whether this traffic frustrates you or not. See, you're not in control whether there's going to be traffic, but you're in control whether I leave early or not, so I can make sure I bypass the traffic. And the third, brothers and sisters, is the power of dua. Now that you know what that is, you know what the power of dua is. You know how power can play a role. Like for example, when we pray for the one that is sick, a person is sick, and they say, for example, before we pray for them, they say, I'm sick, all I'm going to do is going to be doing dua. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I will grant you health. But for me to grant you health, the prerequisite is you have to take medication. Go to the doctor first. When you go to the doctor and you've done your duty, you've done your duty towards getting better, now we've opened up the option. Dua can now play a role in the outcome. If I've went and I've done everything that I've could, for example, I've went to ziyarah, I've did everything I could, now I want people to do dua for me. Now dua might play a role in the outcome. If you do dua for this person, he might be healed. But if this person is sitting down on a chair and just waiting for Allah to heal him, and he's not doing anything, he's not making any proactive decision, then no. The power of dua can shape the consequences of your life, 100%. But not by itself. Is'a ya abdi. Take action, take initiative, my servant. And then I'll take the next step. The fourth is, it balances trust and action. But that teaches us to always try and to always strive and to believe in Allah's plan, but also to do your best. Before you surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, Ya Allah, if you've written this, you've written this. No, it pushes me before I have to put in the work. It's like the story of the man that came in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he came and he had a camel. And he put his camel outside the mosque, he went in to pray. He put his camel outside the mosque, he went in to pray, he came back out and he didn't find his camel. And I asked him, where's your camel? He says, I don't know, I was relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I put my camel, I was relying. I'm like, I'm going to go pray. Of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect my camel. When they spoke to the Prophet says, Aqal wa tawakkal. He says, tie your camel up, then hold on to God. Tie your camel up, then trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But don't leave your camel untied and trust in God. Take action first. And number 5 is, and this is extremely powerful, mind you, this is what is used in cognitive behavioral therapy. This is used in psychology with psychologists today. Psychiatrists, they use this, and that is reframing challenges. Is when you're faced with difficulty, instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me? Why is God doing this to me?" you say, "What is God teaching me? What is God trying to guide me to? How can I grow through this? How can I see this challenge as an opportunity?" And there are many examples, but we'll go into the example of Karbala and see how was this divine unfolding, this plan manifested in Karbala. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. My dear brothers and sisters, I want you to take a moment to truly feel the weight of what we're discussing, the power of what we're discussing tonight. And we've spoken about it, we've spoken about the concept of divine unfolding, but let's now see it in action. Let's see how it was practiced in action. Let's turn our hearts to Karbala. Imagine, if you will, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as he's leaving Medina, he knows what's coming. He knows the hardship that's about to come. He knows the thirst. that he's going to experience and his children are going to experience. He knows of the betrayal. He knows of the ultimate sacrifice. It's all there. It's laid out before him like a map of heartbreak. Yet he chooses to go. He chooses to make the decision. Why? Because this, my brothers and sisters, is bada in its purest of forms. That Imam Hussein alayhi salam isn't just following a script, he's creating Karbala. He's creating Ashura. See, initially Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he embarked on his journey, it was a journey of reform, it was a journey of justice. He wasn't trying to create conflict, he was trying to reform the ummah. But it reached the stage where he knew and he realized this was the end of the road. No, I have been betrayed. But the whole journey, from the beginning to the end, he knew that this is going to end up in sacrifice. And he continued. Choice upon choice. On the night of Ashura, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, on the night of the 10th, he asked Abu al-Fadl Abbas to inform the enemy army, let us prolong this night. Let us spend this night in obedience. Let us spend this night in dua. Now, what was Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam doing? He was orchestrating the 10th of Muharram. He did not want the battle of Karbala to happen at night time. He wanted the battle of Karbala, the atrocities that are to happen in broad daylight, for the world to see. So people do not forget, so people cannot misinterpret and lie about what happened in Karbala. He knew what was happening, and he wanted to ensure that the world can hear about the thirst of Imam Hussein. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam would cry out, "Ala min nasirin yansuruna," is there anyone to defend the sanctity? Is there anyone there? He knew that these words are going to echo throughout time. These were choices by the Imam alayhi salam. Every turn, Imam Hussein alayhi salam is choosing and he's making these choices. But there's one moment, brothers and sisters, that shows the foresight of the Imam. And it shows the power of our choices. Brothers and sisters, tonight is a very special night. Tonight I want to ask you all to do something a bit different than what we've been usually doing. I want to ask you all to really close your eyes as I narrate this story, to take a deep breath and to try and visualize yourself on the 10th of Muharram in Karbala. I want you to take a deep breath right now, a few deep breaths, and I want you to remove yourself from Arncliffe Coronation Hall, and I want you to take yourself to Karbala on the 61st year after Hijrah. See, in the books of history, my brothers and sisters, there are stories and tales that shake the very foundations of our souls. But none can compare to the tale of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, especially in the final moments with his infant son Ali al-Asghar. Imagine a child so young, so innocent, that his life had barely begun. Under 6 months, Abdullah Ali al-Asghar ibn al-Hussein alayhi salam was a delicate flower in the garden of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam's family. And on the 10th of Muharram, as the sands of Karbala ran red with the blood of the shuhada, when a cry pierced the air, it was Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam calling out for help. ألا من ناصر ينصرنا ألا من ذاب يذب عن حرم رسول الله. At this point, brothers and sisters, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is alone. No more Abu Fadil, no more Ali al-Akbar, no more Qasim, no more Muhammad, no more Muslim, no more Habib, no more companions. He's alone now. And Imam alayhi salam is now on the parched plains of Karbala, standing alone. His companions have fallen, his family in danger, and in a cradle nearby Little Ali al-Asghar stirred. The baby, as if he's sensing his father's loneliness, he begins to cry. In his tiny body, weakened by days without water, could barely muster the strength for tears. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, with his heavy heart, with the weight of his mission and the love for his son, turned to his wife Rabab and he says, Rabab, my beloved, he said with a voice, barely a whisper, he says, I must take our son to Yazid's army. Surely they cannot deny him a drop of water. An innocent child. Rabab, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, she nods, and with trembling hands she changes Ali al-Asghar's clothes, even tying a small turban on his head, like any mother. Even in the face of death, she wanted her son to look at his best. As Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam took the child in his arms, wrapping him in a cloth to shield him from the merciless sun. Who can fathom the thoughts that must have raced through the mind of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein? The weight of that moment, the gravity of what is to come. It's almost too much for our hearts to bear, brothers and sisters. And yet, this was the beginning, just the beginning of a tragedy that would echo through the ages. There was a reason why Imam made this choice. A sacrifice that would shake the heavens and the earth. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam steps out of the tent. His infant son cradled in his arms. He was walking not just towards the army of Yazid, but to a moment that will define the very essence of faith and courage and the struggle between right and wrong. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam steps onto the battlefield. His precious son cradled against his chest. A hush fell over the enemy ranks. Some of the soldiers, their hearts hardened by hatred. They didn't know, what was Imam holding? Was he holding a Quran? Was he coming to surrender? But when Imam unveiled the child, a collective grasp rippled through the air. There, in the merciless sun of Karbala, Ali al-Asghar alayhi salam, smiling innocently in the face of his executioners, with a voice that carried the weight of generations, Imam al-Hussein addressed the enemy. Look at what he says. He says, "O people, if in your opinion Hussein is guilty of any sin or crime, this innocent baby has done nothing to hurt any of you. It doesn't even speak. It has not even uttered any word against you or your Amir. He is dying from thirst. He has had neither milk nor water for the last 3 days. Would you quench his thirst by a few drops of water? If you suspect that I demand water for myself in the name of the baby, then I will leave it here. If you want, and go easy, and you may return with the baby, quenching his thirst." The Imam's words hung in the air, heavy with sorrow, heavy with hope. For a moment, the humanity in some of these soldiers flickered. In a moment, a murmur of sympathy arose. In a moment, like a gentle breeze in the scorching desert of Karbala. But evil has a way of silencing the whispers of the conscience. Umar ibn Sa'd, his heart as barren as the land around him, he sensed the danger of compassion. He says, "Beware, my soldiers!" He says, "Beware," and his voice dripping with venom. "Do not be fooled by Al-Hussein's tricks. He seeks water for himself. Even a sip will revive him, and our lives will be ended." Our noble Imam alayhi salam, with the patience of Rasulullah, replies, "I only seek water for the infant whose condition and agony is right in front of you. Since you fear that I may drink from this water myself, I am placing this infant on the ground so that you yourself may take the child and quench his thirst." Ya Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, imagine putting your child on the ground, on the sands of Karbala, under the scorching sun, burning. The heat seared the tender skin of Ali al-Asghar. Yet the infant did not cry. He turned his gaze towards the enemy, his innocent eyes a mirror to their blackened souls. in a voice that echoed with the pain of all of the bereaved fathers, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam calls out, Ali, Ali, my son, show them how thirsty you are. And Ali, this tiny shaheed, this beacon of faith, turned his head and he smiled. What a smile. He opened his parched mouth and his dry tongue moved over his cracked lips. A silent plea more eloquent than 1,000 sermons. Sobs began to erupt from the hardened soldiers. For a moment, it seemed that even the stone hearts might soften. But then the cruel shimmer, fearing the power of innocence, roared, "Do not be swayed! Remember the Emir's orders!" Not a drop of water for Al-Hussein or his family. In that moment of hesitation, evil triumphed. Umar ibn Sa'ad calls out, "Harmala! Iqta' niza' al-qawm! Harmala!" The archer, whose name would be forever cursed, raised his bow, and the air itself seemed to have held its breath as he took aim at the infant's throat. The arrow flew, cutting the desert air with its sinister hiss. Ali al-Asghar, in his final act of defiance, lifted his head, his tiny head. He arched his neck. The arrow found its mark, and silence descended upon Karbala, a silence so profound that it seemed to hollow and swallow the world. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam looked down at his son, at the arrow that had silenced his smile forever. For a moment, the world went dark. The world went dark where he could see again. He gently cradled Ali al-Asghar, the arrow binding father and son in a tragic embrace. With trembling hands, our Imam collected the blood flowing from his son's throat. He raised his hands to the heavens and then to the earth before finally applying it to his own face, whilst his lips moved in a silent prayer, a father's lament to his creator. Years later, Imam Zayn al-Abidin would reveal these words. Imam Zayn al-Abidin would say what my father said as he put the blood of my brother on his face. He says, "Before Allah, I swear that these wretched people are cruel even to an infant. If I throw the blood of this innocent shaheed towards the sky, no rain will ever fall anywhere on earth. And if I throw this blood on earth, then this earth will become parched and unproductive. Therefore, I apply this blood to my face so that I complain to my Creator about the cruelty of these people." Cradling his martyred son, Imam al-Hussein looks to the heavens and whispers, "Ya Allah, give me the courage in this most difficult time of my life. Ya Allah." Brothers and sisters, this will break your heart. Imagine Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam saying these words, "Ya Allah." No prophet was subjected to a test as severe as this. He says, "Ya Allah, no one has experienced what I have experienced in the past couple of days." It is said that in that moment, grief etched itself into our Imam's very being. He turned his beard grey with his infinite tenderness. He covered Ali al-Asghar with his abaya, shielding him one last time from the merciless sun. And then he gathered what strength remained. And he turned towards the camp, towards Rabab, who waited with hope, waiting for her son to have come back with his thirst quenched. As Imam approaches, imagine the narration state, brothers and sisters, that the Imam would walk back and forth, not knowing how to go back to the tents, not knowing how to go back to his wife to tell her that your son has been slaughtered. He does not know, but as he approaches, the weight of this burden grows. 7 steps forward, 7 steps back. Each move a battle between his duty and his heartbreak. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He's repeating a prayer, a testimony to this sacrifice. Finally, he stood before the Rabab, and his eyes meet her eyes. And in that gaze,
a lifetime of sorrow passes, and she says to her husband, Ya Aba Abdullah, what have they done to my son? She cried, her voice shattering with stillness. Did they even give him a drop of water before they killed him, Ya Aba Abdullah? Imam al-Hussein replies with a voice heavy and unshed tears, Ya Rabab, I pleaded with them to give him water, but instead they drenched him with his blood. They drenched me with the blood of my son Ali. And in her final act, Rabab whispered, please bury Ali with your own hands, Ya Aba Abdullah. And so in the burning sands of Karbala, Imam al-Hussein dug a small grave with his sword, laying to rest not just his son, but a own piece of his heart as he stood over the tiny grave. As he stood over the tiny grave, our Imam looked at the heavens and he declared, Oh Allah, bear witness that I have done my duty to the end. And in that moment, the very earth seemed to tremble with the weight of the sacrifice, a sacrifice that would echo through the ages. And it's as if Rabab begins to cry. ما ذنب طفلي بسهم ما ذنب طفلي بسهم للعدا مذبوح ما ذنب طفلي ما ذنب طفلي بسهم للعدا مذبوح ما ذنب طفلي طفل رضيع عطيش القلب يا أعداء لا تقتلوه عيناه غير ذبول يابس الأحشاء فلتنظروا إن كان ذنبي فهذا طفل لا يعنى فلترحموا ويلي عليه لذيذ الماء لا يسقى ما ذنب طفلي عيناه صارت بعيني علني أسقي يرجو أباه لا غير دمعي على خديه مسكوبا هلا رواه يبكي جهيدا ومنه ترعش الأعضاء مما عراه مهلا صغيري سأدعو هؤلاء القوم ما ذنب طفلي What sin has my child done to meet an arrow's bite? What crime deserves this cruel, painful, unjustful plight? A baby so thirsty, his heart parched in the sun. Oh foes, I beg you, spare this one. His eyes once bright, now withered in despair. Look not upon him if you cannot care. Imam Hussein says, if I am at fault, then let my child go free. Have mercy, I plead. Sweet water has been denied, my soul cries in pain. Brothers and sisters, after the shahada of Ali al-Asghar, Imam al-Hussein is now all alone. His companions have all passed. The brothers and sisters, the brothers, the cousins, the nephews, the moments where Sayyida Zainab feed, because soon inevitably she will be alone to protect the sanctity of her Imam Zain al-Abidin. Zainab will be alone to protect the women and the children. She knows what a responsibility, she knows what will come. That's why on the night of the 10th of Muharram, on a night like this, brothers and sisters, she was surrounded by her brothers, she was surrounded by her nephews, and she was sitting down. The poet describes her state. She's sitting down in a tent. After her Salatul Layl, sitting all alone. Then the poet describes her state and as follows. While she's speaking to the world, and she says with a broken heart, and she's addressing the night, she's speaking to the night, she's speaking to the moon. Ya Lail, طول ساعتك يا ليل أحمل آهاتك يا ليل طول ساعتك يا ليل أحمل آهاتك لو ودعت الوليان تتولى عن العدوان طول يا ليل الوداع شمت طول وياك أساهر ما أمل من البواجي حتى لو تعمل نواظر حسين بس هالليلة يمي ما تشوف عيوني باكر صدقني